This shift is the first item of clothing I've created completely by hand, every single stitch. And it's been a really interesting experience. I feel it's put me in touch with all those women who, for hundreds and hundreds of years, have spent hours creating garments just like this. There is a rather magical rhythm to stitching by hand, a sense of real peace and tranquility as you stitch. I've used traditional materials, linen for the shift and linen thread. Here it is. Sewing with a linen thread feels a little bit different. As you pull the needle through the fabric, you have to get the tension just right. When I've made shifts before, I've always been careful to enclose the seams using either a French seam or a flat fell seam. For this one, I've actually hemmed around every individual pattern piece and then whip stitched the seam together. In the 16th century, the tailors were predominantly men, and they employed lots of apprentices and journeyman tailors to create the outer garments, particularly those for the wealthy, with all that amazing padding and slashing in doublets and gowns and cloaks. But we do think that most of the undergarments, the shifts or the shirts, were sewn by women who would learn to sew at their mother's knee. Throughout all layers in society, even those at the highest level, there's a very well-known story about Queen Catherine of Aragon, who went on making shifts for King Henry many years after he decided to set her aside. Now, I've got some advantages over those women who went before me. I've got prescription glasses. Now, eyeglasses were known in the 16th century, but they were fairly primitive magnifying lenses set in a leather or a horn frame, and they were really only available to the most wealthy, so most women didn't have the benefit of that. I've also got a magnifying lens, which makes my stitching really very much easier. And of course, I can always sew in the very best light. So I have got the most enormous respect for the women who sewed before me. In those tiny, tiny stitches that we see in the few examples that do survive from that time. This is the first time also that I've tried blackwork embroidery. Blackwork embroidery was popularised by Queen Catherine of Aragon when she came to England from Spain to marry Prince Arthur. And it remained popular for many, many years. It was used in regular geometric patterns on cuffs and yokes and collars. Later on, it became more free-flowing and then was used on larger items, sleeves, stomachers and gowns and even gentlemen's doublets. The stitch I've used is Holbein stitch, and it's really quite a useful stitch because if you look very closely, you can probably see that the wrong side, the underside, looks almost as good as the right side. Which is actually very helpful if you've got floppy cuffs like these, and you might show the insides a bit. Now, I've made the cuffs attached to my shift. Very often they were separate, which made it much easier to launder them. I'm really rather proud of my shift. In fact, I'm not sure I'm going to want to wear it underneath my gowns that often. Perhaps I'll just keep it for best. Or do what I think they might have done and keep it as my very best night attire.